Hello, everybody. How are you all doing today? Welcome to the third episode of The State of Craft. I am Sami. I'm the CEO of CertiCraft. We are on a mission to help craft cannabis producers transition into and thrive within the regulated market here in Canada. And our flagship product is a compliance-oriented seed-to-sale system that makes it really easy for craft growers to stay on top of all of their records. And today we are presenting a State of Craft episode with two amazing women that I have a huge amount of respect for, Stacy Johnston and Shannon Ross, who are both part of the Cannabis Business Transition Initiative at Community Futures Central Kootenays. For those of you who are just filing in, before we get started, I just want to point out that we have a chat where you can say hi and interact with everybody else here. If you have questions for Stacy or Shannon, as we go through this thing, we have a dedicated questions tab that you can go into to leave questions. And at the very end of this conversation, we'll have a 15-minute Q&A where we'll go through those questions. And without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Shannon and Stacy here. So Shannon and Stacy, hello.
Hello.
Hi, Sami.
Good morning.
Good morning. Do you guys want to maybe each take a minute to just give a little background on who you are, what brought you to the CBTI program, and why you've chosen to stay now almost 2 years later?
Yeah, I can go first and just give a quick overview. Our program with Community Futures has been, we had 2-year funding and it's expires in July. So we're hoping to get it renewed for a little bit longer because there is, good morning, Dan. There is a lot of need. My experience is in the corporate world. So I bring the corporate experience in manufacturing, distribution, and 7 years experience in pharmaceutical. So I've worked in a regulated environment and I also worked in the food industry. So very experienced in regulatory and supply chain, and I was actually taking the self-employment program with Community Futures, and this opportunity came up to help the region get into the cannabis market. So it's been great.
Sounds like your background there is very well suited for the way that Health Canada has been running the regulations.
Very similar to pharmaceutical.
Yeah. Shannon, what about yourself? I would have to agree with that. It's kind of weird that a plant is being treated like a pharmaceutical drug. Yeah. Shannon, what's your background? What brought you to Community Futures and this program here?
Well, I'm the opposite of Stacy, which makes us such a great team because we have such different perspectives. And my background mainly comes from agriculture, and I got involved in. Well, I grew up in the Fraser Valley and my grandparents had a farm. So I kind of grew up with the farm lifestyle and moved into working for Farm Folk, City Folk in the nonprofit world, and really kind of dived into local organic agriculture and studied in organic farming internships, which brought me out to the Kootenays about 20 years ago and started working on a biodynamic farm. And so my background's really in commercial and food production. And at the same time, I've been involved in this legacy cannabis culture here in the Kootenays for 20 years as well. And so my background is really in cultivation, farming, and the culture itself.
Well, it sounds like a match made in heaven between the two of you guys to help people on their journey to getting licensed, and then beyond that too for the clients that you guys have had that you've helped beyond that. I think you said it great there, Shannon. The fact that you guys are super opposite in terms of your experience and background makes for a great pair. And I have seen you guys in action, and I know that pairing does work.
We often say we're two halves of one whole.
Just like a married couple.
She's a better half.
No.
Cool. Well, yeah, the purpose of the State of Craft really is to give our guests a platform to share their perspective on what they see is going really well in the legal craft cannabis industry, what they see is going not really well. And I have a feeling there's going to be a lot more of that than the first part. And what are some solutions? What are some things that either need to take place on a federal level, on a provincial level, on a local level, on a personal grower level, in order to shift things for the better. So I guess I want to start off with what's going well. That's where we tend to like to start off these conversations. Is there anything that you guys would say has gone pretty well so far in the legal craft cannabis world?
In the legal craft cannabis world, it's a short list. Shannon and I have had many conversations about this, and what's going well depends on what side of the fence you're sitting on in this whole legal arena. If you're a big corporate LP, things were going really well. You got first to market, you can sink money into it, you had the structure, you could be prepared to jump in the game. If you're CRA, you're getting, more taxing. The province, as far as the craft grower goes, it's been a tough hill to climb. And I don't know what's going well from the craft grower, from the consumer perspective, and Shannon will speak more to this, is the, public safety and of the product that's on the market. But in the 2 years that I've been hands-on with our region, it's been an uphill battle for people to transition. If that's what Health Canada's intent was, is to help people transition, they certainly didn't provide that in their structure.
Mm-hmm. And that definitely was not an intent of theirs. I mean, that's as far as their mandate goes, and the public list of things that they wanted in the whatever led to the Cannabis Act itself. Like that list of mandates, like helping people transitioning the legacy market over, was not one of those things that was on there.
And that's clear.
Yeah.
So they did that well.
That's going well then.
They said they're not doing it, and they didn't do it. Good job. Yeah.
Shannon, is there anything you'd add to that?
The thing that I like, one of the only things that is going well, is the fact that there aren't any, on the legal side of things, there aren't any unregulated pesticides. Mm-hmm. I think that that's always been my concern, is, as far as being a consumer, is that a lot of the consumers don't know on the production side of things how things have been grown, and that there has been use of unregulated pesticides, and cannabis is a bioaccumulator as well. So if it's grown in places where there's any kind of heavy metals or toxins, then it creates a risk for consumers when they don't understand what's behind it. So that's the thing that I really like about the regulations. It's about one of the only things, but I think that's really important. I think that consumers shouldn't be ingesting unregulated pesticides.
Cool. Do you guys want to move on to what's not going well, or is there anything more to explore there? I think maybe one. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I can think of the other thing that I've seen that has gone well is just I've with all of our clients that we've worked with, it's kind of like this idea of kind of people who have worked in the cannabis industry coming out of the shadows, right? And what's going well is people who are entering into the legal world. It allows them to have conversations and be open about what they do and create relationships. And there's a lot of just kind of bonding that I've seen happen between the cultivators that are all in the same boat together.
And that's interesting to hear about that happening in the Kootenays, because what I've heard about the Kootenays historically and what I've seen living here now is that there has been a pretty strong and tight-knit community. So it's interesting to hear that legalization has actually helped enhance and deepen the connections within the community here. That's something that's news to me personally.
Well, it depends. Like, yes, that's very true. There's very tight knit communities, and there is a huge community. But from the position that I've been in, as being, for someone that has been in that community, understands that there's all these other people and clients that even live kind of further out in the bush and haven't been part. There's a lot more diversity than we seem to recognize. There's a lot of people in the Kootenays that grow cannabis.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's the various studies that have been coming out recently put it at up to 30% of the local economy in the Kootenays is all dependent on cannabis. So it's a pretty huge chunk of the economy for a region. Super critical for this place, and I assume that's a big part of why the Cannabis Business Transition Initiative was created, because it was recognized that if that industry didn't transition and did be forced to shut down through continually increasing RCMP crackdowns, that it would really majorly destabilize the economy here in the Kootenay region.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the reasons that Community Futures, our program manager, Paul Kelly, and executive director, Andrea Wilkie, recognize that we need to do something. We need to help our economy. We need to make sure it grows, that it doesn't crash, and put in the request for the program funding. And it was very quick to be funded to help with that. And really now with COVID, economic recovery everywhere is really important. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of doubled up on the importance of this program.
Well, my fingers are crossed for you that as you get closer and closer to the July date, that various ministries that be in BC that do have some kind of mandates that overlaps with what you guys are doing, I hope that one of them chooses to re-up your funding, because I know I've seen personally so many people in this area who are so grateful and so thankful for your existence, and would not have been able to transition and get licensed without your support. So my fingers are crossed that your program can continue.
Yeah, we feel the same. We know that craft growers a lot of them don't have the skill sets to enter the regulatory world. And because the structure isn't set up for small farmer operators, there's all these financials that need to be done. There's all the SOPs and the applications. So to be able to provide that support to people that otherwise wouldn't have access to it is huge.
So maybe this is a good time to pause and rewind a bit and provide more context, because I'm realizing right now that we never actually explained what the Cannabis Business Transition Initiative actually is. So Shannon or Stacy, one of you maybe want to give us like just a quick summary of what the program is overall, and then what you guys do on a day-to-day basis with the clients that you're working with?
Yeah, I can kind of give an overview, and then Shannon and I, as we said, we're two halves of a whole. And so together we have some pretty distinct skills that we bring. And so Shannon has a pretty clear role, and she's kind of the first step in our process. And then I'm the next step. I'm the handoff. But overall, our program, we don't really have restrictions on what we'll support, but the majority are growers, cultivators, which it falls under the cultivators. And we support them right from the get-go. So cash flows, financials, startup budgets, which is a very eye-opening and important process. And we have funding. We have a loans department in Community Futures that also helps. The application, setting people up with understanding regulations. We offer workshops for people, everything from the transitionary perspective. So I'll let Shannon kind of explain the upfront role that she takes on and what that entails.
Yeah, so my role is really I'm the first point of contact, and I do a lot of gap assessments, and I travel and go to people's sites or proposed buildings or properties, and just kind of chat to people and kind of get them prepared for what they're getting themselves into, which sometimes is, steering people not into it because there's the capacity to, as far as doing the record keeping and the SOPs and working in the super highly regulated industry really isn't for everyone. So I like to assess the capacity that people can take this on and be successful, because a lot of people, are investing from $500,000 and up. And so I really want to make sure that people are going to be successful in this and that they know what they're getting themselves into and they really got their team, because it does take a team of people, generally speaking. And then I just, I focus on facility design and product flow and production methods and inputs and just kind of helping people around, a lot around production and what it's like to produce cannabis in a regulated market compared to the legacy market and how it's different, and just really setting people up for success. Again, looking, doing the business plans. And then that's when I hand them over to Stacy once the facility's kind of up and built and all the ducks are lined in a row and they're ready to go get licensed. Then Stacy goes on to the licensing aspect. And my other role is trying to set people up for getting a loan, because that's one of the biggest challenges of this whole thing is that upon legalization, the banks weren't ready to lend into the industry, especially for the legacy producers. So at this point, Community Futures Loans Program is one of the only places that I know that will take these kinds of opportunities, which can be perceived somewhat like a risk, where a lot of other kind of traditional lenders won't. But that back to this Community Futures is really about community and building community. And so with a relationship that Stacy and I have with our clients, we really get to know people. And so if they get to our loans manager, it's because we have thoroughly assessed what they're getting themselves into, and we've done all the risk mitigation and feel that confident in lending.
So it really does sound like it's a very, very thorough program that prepares your clients for every single aspect of what it means to be a licensed producer in this new regulated world that we find ourselves in. Would you guys agree with that statement?
As much as we can. As you know, the regulations are this thick. So Shannon and I point out as much as we can along the way. But people need to kind of research and get their team
and read the regulations on their own and understand them on their own. If they're not able to do that, I think that's been a theme in a few of the episodes we've had so far, that you got to take responsibility for it yourself. And if you don't actually read the regulations and understand it yourself, then you're probably not the right kind of person to go for this, because you're committing to everything in the Cannabis Act and the cannabis regulations. And so it's up to you to really understand what you're committing yourself to.
It is. And I find, like, as Shannon said, the indoor growers typically will have a team of people. So you have, even if you have 3 or 4 people, you can segregate the skills. Whereas an outdoor farmer, essentially, a one-man show or one-woman show, they are trying to do it all. And that's where I find I'm lending more support. I'm kind of like the Health Canada hotline. I get the text, I get the call, I get the email. What do I do? How do I do this? And that's where I feel I'm supporting, because they're on their own. They're doing their one crop a year. It's outdoor. They don't have a quality person and a person to help with SOPs. So I'm finding I'm lending a lot more support.
So maybe that Health Canada hotline is a nice segue to chatting about Health Canada, because Health Canada, they are the organization in the Canadian government that is in charge of the cannabis industry today. And if you just brought up that you've been Health Canada hotline, which tells me that immediately there's a lot of confusion around what is needed in terms of relating with Health Canada and in terms of getting answers from them. I can say from my experience as a creator of a software system that generates reports for Health Canada, I have been appalled by how little communication they are willing to do. I will send them questions because their FAQs don't have the actual answers we need around how to format certain portions of the reports that they are requiring. And 2 weeks later, I will get a copy and pasted answer from their FAQs that just has one word that matches a question that I've asked that has nothing to do with the question I've actually asked. And to me, it's like mind-boggling that is an experience that a professional service provider in a professional industry can have trying to talk to a regulator. And I've heard lots of horror stories from a lot of our customers about their experiences trying to communicate with Health Canada. And you guys are in a unique position where you've represented or you've worked with over 50 growers at this point who have been going through the licensing process. So I feel like you, more than anybody else, will have seen trends in terms of how Health Canada does communicate or operate. And I'm curious, like what are some things that you would share to anybody who is coming in to this industry, thinking about getting licensed, to kind of prepare them for what they can expect in trying to work with Health Canada in this licensing process?
Yeah, you reference them as being a service provider. And I
reference ourselves as being service providers.
CertiCraft. Oh, sorry. I thought you were saying Health Canada. Yeah.
No. I was talking about ourselves.
You guys most definitely are. They're definitely not. Yeah, it's interesting because I am dealing with them representing our clients routinely. Like I have 5 clients right now that I'm dealing with RMIs on and different reviewers. And
can you just let our audience know what is an RMI for those who might not know what that is?
Oh, a request for more information. So you send in your application documents and typically you will get, I would say, at least 2 RMIs until you get licensed.
Okay.
And so I've worked with a varied amount, like varied reviewers, and only a couple of them are actually helpful human beings. The other ones are robots, and they don't get intimate with the actual applicant or the application. So the questions they're asking, it's almost as if they have not looked at anything that's been submitted on the application, anything that's in the GPP or the OSP reports, because they're asking things that have nothing to do with the actual application. So it's really frustrating. I think they have copy and paste, like you said. I think they just have a database of copy and paste where they just go and without much thought ask questions. My suggestion to people going into this is don't assume that Health Canada knows what they're doing. Don't assume that the person that's emailing you understands. And so if you need to go back and educate them and point out, then do that. I've had reviewers ask cultivators to sign attestations that are clearly and in their own guidance says in bold for processors only, for a processing license only. And so I've gone back and challenged that with the reviewer who's telling me, nope, this needs to be signed. And I'm like, but this is a cultivator and it's a process, like a hard.
It literally says in the form for
literally
processors
says,
only.
I'll highlight it, I'll copy and paste, and this reviewer, she's like, well, I've done hundreds of these, and I always get them to sign it. And I'm thinking, well, that's unfortunate that people are blindly, that this is where we're at. So Health Canada asks you to sign something, you just sign it to get your application in. And, you know, I feel like saying, well, that's not a big win when you're just, you know, people are just signing whatever. So not, you know, big celebration. They did come back and say, oh yeah, you're right, it is for processors only, we don't need that. And it's just like, that's just one of many things that I've kind of like been able, because of my experience going through all this license, that I've been able to push back. So it just frustrates me thinking all of these applicants that are just knowing theirs, they just have to go with what they're dealt with.
And I think even if somebody does, you know, because I can imagine lots of those hundreds of growers that regulator was referring to, I would imagine that lots of them see the form and they're like, what the fuck, that says for processors only, but it's Health Canada, they control the license flow. And so
100%.
there's a huge power dynamic there. Like, how are you going to be like, no, you're wrong, when the government body that controls a license is saying otherwise? I think it takes a lot of confidence to be willing to say no to that when there's been so much opacity and lack of transparency within, and missteps within the organization.
Mm-hmm. When this morning, and they need to get reviewers that know micros and that know agriculture. I mean, the cultivation really shouldn't even be with Health Canada to begin with. The processing, it makes sense that it's pharmaceutical, it's consumer safety. They should be, you know, not that it should be at a pharmaceutical level, but a food level. Like, it does need to be regulated, but the cultivation should not be this regulated. And they should have a separate set of guidelines that is just more agricultural. One of the RMIs is, we notice your destruction space and your outdoor fenced grow, because she's going to mix it with manure, and they're like, oh, well, it's too close to your grow area, it's going to contaminate the grow area. And it's like, her amendments will have aged composted manure.
It's literally going to go into the soil.
In the grow area. And so her reaction, because it's Health Canada, is, oh, should I move it? Should I not mix it with manure? Like, and it's like, no, we need to school Health Canada. Yeah. And so we need to respond and say, no, we're not concerned about contamination, because one of the amendments for growing is going to be the same product.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of education that most applicants are just ready to try to circumvent, to just get their application in and, you know, fight it, so to speak.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I mean, me and Shannon are both part of the Cannabis Economic Development Council here in the Kootenays, and one thing that the federal working group that we're both part of as well has talked about a lot is trying to push for getting cannabis cultivation to be taken away from Health Canada and given to Agricultural Canada, because that would solve two different issues. One, what you're talking about, where Ag Canada actually has expertise in-house around agriculture. You don't have to teach them the basics of farming. And two, their mandate is to support farmers and help farmers succeed. Health Canada has no mandate whatsoever to help the cannabis industry. Their only mandate is around the safety of Canadians with products that reach them. So what you were talking about earlier, Stacy, where, you know, keeping processing there, because at that point you are now taking an agricultural product and turning it into a consumer product. That makes sense. That fits within their mandate. But the agricultural part really doesn't. And I do agree with you. I think if Canada shifts the jurisdiction of cannabis as an industry on the cultivation side from Health Canada to an agricultural organization, whether it's Ag Canada or whether it's done provincially with like the BC Ministry of Agriculture or something like that, then you have actual alignment between the expertise, the mandates, and the desires of the ministry or the governmental department with the industry, and it becomes a supportive and collaborative experience instead of an adversarial one, like what we're seeing so far.
Yeah.
Shannon, you're the only person here with a really strong background in agriculture, so I'm curious if you can share your perspectives on what me and Stacy have been chatting about right there.
Well, I agree with you completely, and I think it's really frustrating for me. I would say that most for myself, and I would say the majority of our clients here in the Kootenays, and maybe what makes us a bit of an anomaly is as far as the majority of cannabis cultivators here have values that are in alignment with regenerative agriculture and sustainability. And this is like, for the culture here, we don't really look at it like a drug. We look at it like a plant, and it's just, it's a plant, and it's an agricultural crop. And not only that, but there's so much creativity and so much to learn from cannabis producers when it comes to people who are really passionate about living soil. And I really want to see cannabis growers that like to grow sun-grown or like to grow indoors in living soil with their LED lights. They should be able to flourish and explore and look at these more sustainable methods of cultivation. It's really, I think, just so important because it's in alignment with the values and the ethics of the culture in a lot of the ways, especially here in this rural area. Living soil, I'm really passionate about. And when you look at it like growing in a pharmaceutical lab, then living soil doesn't belong in a pharmaceutical lab. But I also think that we need to be really thinking big picture right now. We need to be thinking about climate change. We need to be looking at new possibilities and opportunities to cultivate in a way that takes into consideration the earth, water, climate, and how to do things, and in alignment with values to move forward for a better future.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Scott Wilkins in the chat agrees with you. He says, yes, growing cannabis indoors is so anti-environment, need to reduce the carbon footprint. Yeah, and I think cannabis and hemp more broadly has such transformative powers for our society on an environmental level. Like, the only reason that cannabis became illegal in the first place in the 1930s, 40s there was because the paper industry and Andrew Carnegie, who had invested the equivalent of billions of dollars into the nylon industry, were both distraught when somebody figured out how to turn hemp into a much more powerful, much more durable, much cheaper material to create any kind of fiber out of, or any kind of fibrous byproduct rather out of. And so there's a slander campaign that was started, and cannabis was starting to be called marijuana to associate it with Latinos that racist America and Canada was afraid of at the time, and that's all it was. It was they didn't care about cannabis. It was about hemp. It was about not allowing this sustainable, cheap, and very strong fibrous plant to replace the paper industry, the fabrics industry, the rope industry, and any industry that used fibers. And to me, I think that's one of the most interesting and powerful things that I would like to see realized over the next few decades here, is to really shift away from tree-based industries, lumber-based industries for things that don't need lumber. We can get 4 or 5 times the product from hemp. You can regrow hemp a few times a year if you have auto flowering hemp, and for way cheaper without anywhere near the carbon footprint, and get really high quality paper products and whatever other kinds of products that we need in our world. That's a thing that I don't hear talked about much in the cannabis industry, because it kind of gets a bit outside of cannabis. But to me, it's like part and parcel of the same thing.
It is cannabis. It's a plant, and it's more than just a recreational to smoke. It's actually a lot more. That's not really why I'm here, even though I like to smoke it. And maybe if more people smoked it, they start thinking about this.
Yeah. Do you know, Shannon, are there any farms where they like grow cannabis, they cultivate the flowers for medicine or for recreational use, and then they use the actual stalks and fibers for creating paper or fabrics of any kind? Is there anything like that in the world that you know of?
Not that I'm aware of locally here, but I think that that's a really important goal for us here, is to start thinking about that, and to again be innovative. I think that that with some support and less barriers, that the Kootenay region will continue to be creative and innovative, and try, and with those, because this culture has so much values, that I can see everybody really working hard at that in the future. But meanwhile, we just got to figure out how to even get to market and how to survive. So that's a good in a strategic plan.
Yeah. So is there anything else that you guys feel is not going so well that you think needs to change in the legal craft cannabis world?
I would like to prompt Shannon to share just some views on the legacy growers and the legal and perspective, I guess, because working with Shannon for the last 2 years, I just love listening to her insight on how cannabis has been viewed, how growers have been viewed, and the stigma. And she's such an amazing advocate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just love all of our clients so much. And that's one of the things that I just love about my job. Is I love getting in my car and, going out to a rural farm, and, I get out of my car, and, these kind of, really beautiful, kind, compassionate, a lot of hippies and draft dodgers, and, I get introduced to these people, and I'm like, these people are criminals? Like, I don't know. I don't know. I think that there's just not a lot of education, and I'm so fortunate to be brought up in this culture. But for people outside of this culture that don't understand it, it makes me feel really sad that there's this perception that our culture is criminals. There was that drug policy report. What was it called? The Canadian Drug Policy Coalition in 2016, they produced a report, and in it, they were referencing that, I can't remember exactly. They studied a random 500 marijuana production cases, and over an 8-year period, and only 5% of the files were affiliated with organized crime. So
Health Canada makes it seem like everybody is a criminal in this world if they have an ACMPR license.
Yeah, and this is it's what the Compassion Club, this is all born out of wanting to help people and provide people with with tools to get out of pain, or to the first time I ever saw the benefits of cannabis was when I was a lot younger, and I was feeling really sick, and and I was nauseated, and someone's like, "Oh, just have one little puff," and I was like, "Okay, I'll have one little puff, but I don't know about this," and then all of a sudden I could just rest. This is everybody in this culture that I know are just real beautiful humans that want to grow regenerative, that want to grow with living soil, want to grow sun grown, want to make topicals and tinctures and provide people with with some tools. So that part saddens me, and I think that maybe the biggest one of my I would love to, if we could roll back time. I wish that there was like a lot more education that came out. I wish that Health Canada and the government would start, educating people on what is cannabis, what is this plant, where did it come from, what are the uses, and when you start looking at it like that, then yeah, it's not. I don't think that it's really good to. It should have just been decriminalized. The whole entire thing is messed up right now. Yeah.
Is there any one thing, Shannon, that you think is like the worst offender when you say the whole entire thing is messed up right now? If you can narrow it down to like one single.
The sales and distribution.
Okay, what about it?
That it's developed for big industry, and there's not an easy way for craft growers to sell. And then it's, that's the hardest part. And that, a lot of the dispensaries, were people who also wanted to provide medicine to people. And there was all these structures set up that were really working. And if you could just decriminalize it and tax it and put some analytical tests on it, then everything would have just been tickety-boo, and and there would have been room for everybody. Mm-hmm. But instead, my personal belief is that, the government rolled it out like the legacy people, they're all criminals. We need to just industrialize this and give all the opportunities to big ag and big industry and big corporations and put it into pharma. And it's just, it's really unfortunate. It's really sad to see this. And I just really want to see the craft growers get to market and really get, and I want the consumers to understand, what real high quality cannabis is. And then at the same time, understand what's behind the culture, who are the people behind it. And I would love to see, the craft cannabis culture kind of rise from the ashes with these new opportunities and suggestions on how to create a different world with values and ethics, and looking at sustainability and how this plant can help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's really sad when you think about it. Like, prior to the rollout of the cannabis regulations, you had a very successful, a very thriving craft cannabis industry with a supply chain that went from farmers all the way to retail stores. I was living in Vancouver at the time that the regulations were released, and there was like every single block almost had a cannabis store, and and they were all very successful. And you're right, Shannon. If all that was done was it was decriminalized, there was analytical testing done to ensure that those, harmful pesticides that are banned aren't actually on there, and you're taxing it properly. You're actually tracking the supply chain. That's really all that was needed. But instead, it's been turned into a pharmaceutical industry, which is weird.
It's all
when
been based
it's a flower
of fear. Yeah, it's fear-based. It's, drugs are bad. It's a drug. It's been, how are we going to make this legal and safe? And instead of looking at it for really what it is.
Well, I think though there's a balance too, and I'm not anti-pharma too. Like, when just before legalization, I was invited to some universities to chat about cannabis and different genetics, and how different genetics would create different cannabinoid profiles, and like how do we analyze which cannabinoids could be good for different things. And I can respect medicine, like I'm alive because of that. I had a tumor in my ear and I've had my ear in, so I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, I'm going to put myself in your shoes. And yeah, if you can find some sort of way to inject cannabis into the brain to fight tumors, awesome. I'm not but there's got to be room for everybody.
Yeah.
That's all. Like, there's enough room for all of us, but at least give the craft people a chance.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about an injections of extracted cannabinoids into a sensitive organ in our body, then yes, that clearly does need to be treated pharmaceutically. You don't want to fuck up having an injection have heavy metals in it that now you're injecting because you weren't testing for that. And I think we're all on the same page here when we're just saying that when we're just talking about flower that isn't processed in any kind of way, it should be treated as what it is, a flower. It's literally what it is. Flower, nothing else.
And I think that's just on that note too. What could change and what a solution could be too is allowing the craft growers to just have a packaging license instead of needing a micro processing license and a quality assurance personnel. Because I also work at a micro cultivation facility here in a town of 800 people. I'm an hour away from any big city. So I'm curious.
And that's counting Nelson as a big city right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Which
yeah,
is not true.
Yeah. So where's that QA person? So I can't just package my flower and sell?
Yeah. And then that gets right down to the whole environmental thing as well, with the way that Health Canada are forcing packages to be done. It's super wasteful. Like I remember when I used to go into the dispensaries back in Vancouver, you'd have a giant jar, a reused jar, and they would just weigh out whatever you needed in that moment, and that was it. It was there. You didn't have all this wasteful material, all this plastic being used time and time again to create smaller quantity bags than what most people want to buy. It's really that's one of the things that really set. I hope that Health Canada in time, or Ag Canada, if they take over flower only type stuff, will be okay with this idea of having a deli style approach. I mean, they're clearly okay with it, with meats, with cheeses, with all the things you'd find in a deli at a grocery store. What makes cannabis that different that you can't have a similar setup done in a regulated and food safe manner?
Yeah, I saw actually the most amazing packaging on the legacy market the other day, and I don't want to give it away because it's just like, it's so cool, but I was just like opening this package and, there was no waste. And in fact, it could even be reused for other things. And I'm like, oh, this is so brilliant and so creative. And there's so much brilliance and creativity that comes out of this legacy culture with, again, back to these values of sustainability. And there's no room.
Yeah. All right, guys, we're nearing the end of our time here for the discussion. We'll shift to the Q&A shortly. So audience, if you have any questions, do ask them, and upvote the ones that you like. We'll be going in order of most popular to least popular. Before we shift, Nick, I have a question for you. I think you earlier shared that report that Shannon was referring to. If you still have a link to that, if you want to share it in the chat, I think that'd be great if anybody wants to see that report, which to me sounds like it's pretty damning of Health Canada. If it says 5% of growers are actually associated with criminals and they're treating the entire industry as if it's criminal, that's pretty fucked up.
And it's from 2016, the report. So
it's not that long ago.
No.
And I guess I want to turn it over to you, Shannon and Stacy. Any last things that you think are really important that you want to share before we shift over to the Q&A side of things?
It's never ending. It's hard to sum it up. And to be honest, it's a lot of it's been said. I don't feel like I have anything new, any nuggets that, no one's ever thought of, or it's already been said. I think we're all on the same page with getting through it. I would say, I guess, advice for people is, if you're going to take a step into the legal world, step into it for what it is right now. If you step in being frustrated and fighting against the regs every day and questioning them, then just sit back and wait. Now is not the time for you, because it is what it is right now. And if you're going to enter it, just
be prepared for that reality.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Shannon, any last words from you before we see what the audience wants to know from you guys?
Shannon should have her own YouTube channel.
I think just I really just I really would like to encourage people to become educated on the plant. Really do some research, understand where it came from and the traditions that it came from, and understand the benefits, and really just open your mind and outside of just, that it's a recreational product to smoke, and look at, what this plant can do for the future of our world.
Great. All right. Well, I'd like to invite a certain legal Larry to join the stage here, and I think he's going to ask questions. Scott, I saw you brought up the Allard trial. Just FYI, we have John Conroy along with Jack Lloyd as our next guest for episode 4. So come back in 2 weeks if you want to check that. Hey, Larry, how you doing?
Hi. Hey, everyone. That was so good. I learned so much.
Amazing. I'm glad you
Thanks
did,
so much,
Larry.
Stacy and Jen.
Hey, Larry.
I definitely. Hi. Thank you so much for all the info. I learned so much, and I definitely care about what I ingest. I don't want any pesticides. I like to know everything that's going into my body.
For those of you who haven't met
All
Larry
the
yet,
organic.
he is our newest team member at CertiCraft. He is helping us produce a lot of content, and Stacy and Shannon both actually requested that Larry come in and do the Q&A. And so we said, sure, if you guys want Larry to do that, then we can make that happen.
Yay!
Larry's the
Hi,
best.
everyone I haven't met. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, I'm a cannabis grower. You can probably tell from looking at me. Yeah. I'm a grower in the Kootenays. I heard somewhere that there's 30% of the Kootenays that depends on cannabis. So I'm part of it. So yeah, we have a few questions. And let's see. There's a few people here who want to know about inspections. I hate inspections. Health Canada. They're totally robots. So maybe Stacy and Jen, can you tell us anything, any advice you have for inspections, or anything you've learned along the way from your experiences?
Yeah. I've learned the same thing I learned through the applications. And when Health Canada asks you for things, you have every right, and you should feel confident in defending what you have, and how you feel it complies. Is that coffee in there, Larry?
Yeah, just having my morning coffee.
Nice. Yeah. So my experience is the inspectors are about as well versed as the reviewers as far as micros. And they seem to think that the micro is going to have the same system as a large LP, even if you're a single person running a farm. And so just to defend what you have, and don't sit back and just accept what their questions are and assume that you need to comply. We need to educate them during the process.
Oh, Larry,
I
are you still
definitely think it could be useful to have that Health Canada hotline. I can use a hotline.
Call me anytime, Larry.
Yay, that'll be helpful. Well, I'm curious now, Stacy. What's the funniest question you've had about Health Canada, or the most common question?
From our clients about, like, as a hotline person?
Yeah.
They're all actually really good questions. None of them are funny. They're all good ones. Can I have my dog in my office?
I like dogs.
Yeah, me too.
And Shannon, anything on your side?
I would just echo Stacy, and again, part of what we try to do here at Community Futures with our clients is, we try to encourage them to get educated, understand the GPP guides and the OSP guides, and know your regulations, and especially under the micro cultivation and just to understand the difference between standard and micro. So when you're being inspected, that you can push back because, it's just important to know your business and what you're getting into. And then you can advocate for yourself.
Okay, great. And is Health Canada making their audits any more transparent? Are they doing anything to help us in the future?
One thing, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what Health Canada is doing, but one thing that I can share from my experience working with pharmaceuticals. So I worked with a contract pharmaceutical company. So we worked with all the big pharmas, and we got audited by Health Canada, the FDA, other global regulatory bodies. And we were in existence for 20 years plus, and there wasn't an audit we had that we didn't get observations or feedback or improvements. So I just want everybody to know that just expect that you're going to have things that Health Canada is going to want you to improve, and that will be, just expect it for years and years and years, because even the big pharmas get feedback. They're always a part of their inspection process is to help you improve and glean off best practices. So it's not a bad thing. As Tamara said, there's definitely improvements they need to make as far as what's a major, what's a minor, and all of that. But working for big pharma, it was unheard of. It wouldn't exist for someone to go through an audit without observations of some kind that were given to improve one system or another. It's part of the process.
I just wanted to jump in here real quick with an out of order question, because Tamara asks if you guys can share your experiences, any of your experiences that you're willing to share with Health Canada inspections. And I just want that to come in now because it's just very tied into what you've been talking about so far. And the other questions are totally different topics.
Yeah, so they've been, my experience has been with COVID, so they've been virtual. So you kind of got to do a tour of them and be prepared to walk them around with a video. Again, the reviewers were not versed in the micro, one person operation. So they were looking for the paper trail of it going from department to department for things. And, we had to kind of keep saying, yeah, it's just me. Yeah, it's only me. Yeah, that's me again. So I think they ended up getting it. There was a few things that I was able to, because I'm confident and I just know what they can and can't ask, that I pushed back on. But it was a good experience. That was the one that I did for an indoor cultivator was 3 reviewers, and they were quite young. But they were very friendly. I didn't feel worried or like they were coming in against us, but I can absolutely see someone that's, from the legacy market. It's very stressful for someone. So if you are going to get an audit, and you're feeling worried, get some support, maybe even do a pre-audit. Like something that we do is to kind of do a self-audit to help people get prepared and to talk to Health Canada, go through documents and stuff.
Okay, great. That's helpful. Well, Dave has a question.
So.
Dave wants to know if there's a chance the program might expand to other regions of the province.
Isn't the CBTI program?
I wish that this was available for everybody. Shannon and I have often said how fortunate we are to be in this role, to be offering this service to people that otherwise wouldn't have access to it because of expensive consultants. And in our experience, consultants haven't been the best guidance either. So, yeah, it would be amazing if it could, but people have to get funding.
Is there anything that the public can do to help make sure that what you're doing, the good work that you're doing, gets the funding it needs?
Yeah, shout it from the rooftops, talk to government. The government is, it's get it in the funders' ears. Whoever's giving grants and funding, let them know how much this is needed in your area.
And I know ultimately the reason that CBTI, the Cannabis Business Transition Initiative, exists is because the local community futures in Nelson decided to go out of their way to realize the program. So, if you want a similar program, talk to the community futures in your area. I'm certain that quite a number of them have had requests come in. I know the one that's near Lillooet, a few on the island have had growers in their region start to reach out to them once CBTI here was announced. I know a few of them are taking it really seriously and looking into funding to make it happen. And the more that local cultivators and producers in a particular area are talking to that community futures to make it known that, hey, this is going to have a huge impact for me, the more likely it is to be realized, because they're not going to do anything if there's not demand for it. And maybe in those areas, the people who work at community futures don't have the kind of understanding of the cannabis industry that that Paul Kelly and Andrea Wilkie here in the Nelson Community Futures did have. So yeah, that's what I would recommend personally.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Scott has a question. Scott wants to know, yes, what's the deal with insurance and contracts? I'm not sure if you want to elaborate, Scott, on what you mean by what's the deal, but I guess just a general question about insurance and contracts.
I don't know the deal. You need insurance. I don't know. Yeah, I'd need to know.
Oh, he adds for sales of product.
Well, insurance, you want to have, I'm not an expert on insurance at all. I know from what I understand, there's 3 companies that are in Canada right now that are providing insurance in the cannabis industry, which, and I think all the brokers have the same access to those 3. Your insurance coverage, I know that there's questions around product recall with the province, so you just have to know what insurance you require. And contracts would be with the processor, so that's something that I'm thinking is a separate question from insurance. Is that, I don't know. I'm kind of winging it with what I'm answering because I'm not really sure. Some processors will require you to sign a supply agreement, and they're all varied as a processor. So that's another conversation. And
I think to Shannon's point that she made earlier about, there not being a viable supply chain for small scale growers being one of the single biggest issue today. I'd say like a lot of our customers would echo that they're with the way that supply chain exists right now, most provinces won't even buy product from a small scale grower. They require you to sell your product to a larger processor, and guess what? That larger processor is one of your competitors. It's like it's kind of fucked up. It's like they're forcing you to sell your product to a competitor, and they're relying on them fully to get your product to market. And that's what exists today. And it's
we need more processors for craft growers. I know Joint Venture in the Okanagan is doing amazing, supporting craft growers and getting their product out. And there's a few other ones.
There's quite a few that are emerging now that are like just waiting on their sales amendment or all the various. I know there's a few on the island. There's like integrated processing. There's blackfin extract. I've heard of what's the Saskatchewan-based one? Shelter. The Shelter.
Yeah, Shelter.
All Shelter. Yeah.
I'm curious. You guys were talking about creative initiatives, things that people were doing a little bit differently to help craft growers. Are there any initiatives you've seen that you can talk about?
No, I think
we can talk about the co-op that we're working on. a processing co-op here in the region. It's in its really early infancy, but there's a group of growers that are collectively getting together to get that launched. And as anybody that's entered the processing world knows, it's a lot of work. So that'll be a good solution for our region. Much needed.
Stacy and Shannon, I have one last question for you before we wrap this up here, because we are out of time here. Dave Christie had a follow-up to his question around programs elsewhere. He says that they are talking to Community Futures and Kamloops, but would be very interested if you guys have any advice for how to try and push to have a local program created there. Do you have any advice for him in approaching his Community Futures?
Well, Community Futures is organized by the board of directors. And so I think, educating the board of directors is important on the industry and the importance of the industry. There's a lot of education that needs to happen. So it's always just really starts with educating people of what it's all about and why it's important and who it's serving, and looking at the economic benefits of having a legal industry once there's an avenue to market. And I know that there's a lot of Community Futures that are all educated on this program that really want to start this program. There's a ton of Community Futures now, but it's just really a matter of having the government support.
And I think a big issue right now, like my understanding in chatting with Andrea not too long ago, is that the BC government was really interested in making this a province-wide program, but with COVID and all of the recovery programs that they needed to have, like just budget has not been available in the way that they were expecting it to. And I think that is a big problem that people are coming against, that, while they do want to prioritize this, they want to prioritize COVID recovery more. So I think that's just like a really unfortunate timing with this pandemic going on right now. But I think that is a legitimate part of the reality that we have here. Budgets are super tight for government ministries today. All right, guys. Well, I think we can wrap it up here. We are 7 minutes over. Any last words from Legal Larry, Shannon, or Stacy before we wrap things up?
It was nice.
Happy not to be a
Larry.
I use CBD oil all the time.
Oh, nice.
It helps with my anxiety.
Well, thank you everybody for being here today. For those of you who joined late and don't know who we are CertiCraft. We work on a compliance platform to make staying licensed really, really easy once you have your license. So hit us up if you are curious to learn more about our services. Thank you very much, Stacy. Thank you very much, Shannon, for taking the time to be here with us today and for being our guests on this third episode. And Larry, thanks to you for joining at the end there too, and for lending your hilarity and voice to us today. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for being here. Oh, and next time we have John Conroy and Jack Lloyd, two lawyers who have successfully taken Health Canada to court. Yeah. And so we'll get the legal perspective on the state of the craft cannabis industry. So I hope you guys follow up then.
Legal.
Happy Friday.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Ciao.